In this lecture, let's take a moment to get into a discussion on game design. Designing a game can take just as long as programming one. There are numerous decisions to be made. We can tackle this subject from various angles. To get started, let's think about where the camera will be facing. The camera should follow the player. However, in which direction should it be facing the player? I think the camera should be looking at the forward direction of the blocks. If we were to select any of the blocks, they would have the same forward direction. As we discussed before, it's considered standard practice to use the blue arrow as the forward direction. Let's adjust the scene camera to look in the same direction as the blue arrow. During the development of our game, we should always consider where the camera is pointing. Otherwise, we may have inconsistencies during gameplay. Now that we've established the camera's direction, let's start thinking about the player's starting position. For this game, the player should start on the beach. After all, the game's premise is Bruno being stuck on an island. He'll likely start from the beach. We're going to position him in the lower right corner. It'll be a while until we add the model for the player. Therefore, let's create a temporary placeholder for the player. This step is optional, but can be helpful. If we know the player's starting position, we can design the game around that location. In the hierarchy, right-click on an empty area. Select Create Empty. Rename the object to Player Placeholder. Next, let's reset the Transform component by right-clicking on the Transform component. Select Reset. By using the Create Empty option, an empty game object will be created. It's the most basic game object that can be created. Moving the game object may be a challenge. Without visual information, it can be difficult to determine its location. One solution may be to use a 3D object. This solution works, but there is an alternative solution you may want to consider. We can use a custom icon. For example, let's select the Directional Light game object from the hierarchy. Next, press the F key to focus the sun. This game object is not viewable by the player. If the player looks at this object, they won't see anything. But what about the sun icon? Unity adds the sun icon to help developers find this object from the scene. It's purely for editing purposes. It's not uncommon to have game objects without visual information. At the same time, we may need to know the location of these objects from within our scene. Unity allows us to assign icons to a game object. Let's select the Player Placeholder object. Next, under the Inspector window, there's an option for the icon. By default, Unity supplies us with various icons for a game object. I'm going to use the blue diamond icon. Next, let's position the placeholder in the bottom right corner of the map. Hopefully, the icon will help you identify the location of the game object as you move it around. Don't worry about accuracy. In a future lecture, we'll delete this game object from the game. Its purpose is for our reference as we're designing the level. Let's add more placeholders. The game is going to have a cave, a treasure chest, and an NPC. I'm going to zoom away from the map. Afterward, let's view the map from an aerial view. The icon is small. However, this gives us an idea of the player's starting location. Based on this position, we can decide where to position the other locations. For this game, I'm going to position the cave in the top right corner. The treasure chest will be positioned in the top left corner. Lastly, the NPC will appear at the bottom left corner. As an exercise, I want you to create placeholders for each of these locations. Once again, the position of the placeholders doesn't have to be perfect. They will be deleted with real game objects. Pause the video and give it a try. Welcome back. If you were able to add the placeholders, that's great. If not, that's fine as well. Let's try adding them together. The first step is to create the game objects. To save time, let's duplicate the first placeholder. Select the Player Placeholder object. Next, duplicate this object 3 times. For the second copy of the object, Rename the object to Cave Placeholder. Change the icon to a green diamond. Next, select the third copy. The object should be renamed to Treasure Chest Placeholder. The icon for this object will be updated to a yellow diamond. Lastly, select the last game object. Set the name to NPC Placeholder. Change the icon to an orange diamond. The placeholders are ready. As mentioned before, the cave to the dungeon will appear at the top right corner. The cave's entrance will be accessible from the second tile map. Let's move the placeholder to this location. Great! We can move the next placeholder. The treasure chest will appear at the top left corner of the map. Let's move the placeholder to this location. Lastly, the NPC will appear at the bottom left corner. Move the placeholder to this location. Upon zooming out and switching to an aerial view, we are given a better idea of the game. In this corner, we have the player's starting location. This corner will be the cave. The next corner will be the treasure chest location. Lastly, the bottom corner will be for the NPC's location. As we design the map, we can tailor the design to these locations. Hopefully, this information helps you lay out the game. Adding placeholders with custom icons can be a great way to reference specific locations while designing the map. In the next lecture, let's continue designing the map.